The waiter asked me for the third time if I wanted to order, and that's when it finally hit me. He wasn't late. He wasn't stuck in traffic. He wasn't coming. My husband had chosen someone else on the night that was supposed to belong to us. I felt the words settle in the back of my throat like something heavy I could not swallow. The restaurant around me was warm and low-lit, full of soft conversations and clinking glasses, but at our table, the air felt thin. I looked down at the menu again, not because I was hungry, but because I needed something to stare at that wasn't the empty chair across from me. "I can give you a few more minutes," the waiter said softly, trying to sound kind, but there was a shade of pity behind his eyes that made my skin crawl. "It's fine," I heard myself say. "He should be here soon." That sentence had already expired. It felt brittle as it left my mouth. The small gift bag on the table mocked me. Inside, neatly wrapped, was the watch he had been eyeing for months. I had listened to him mention it in passing once, maybe twice, and I had stored that detail away like I always did. It was what a good wife did. She remembered. She paid attention. She cared. He had forgotten. I checked my phone again, even though there were no new notifications. The last message from him still sat there, glowing on the screen. "Running late. Meeting went over. I'll be there. Promise." He had sent it 47 minutes ago. I typed and erased 3 different replies before finally writing, "Are you on your way?" and pressing send. The little "delivered" label appeared. No typing dots, no response. Around me, couples leaned closer to each other, their faces relaxed, their shoulders touching. A woman at the next table laughed, covering her mouth with her hand as her partner reached across to brush his thumb along her knuckles. The intimacy of it made me look away. I wondered what I looked like to them. A wife waiting for her husband? A woman stood up. A fool. I smoothed my dress over my legs, even though no one was really watching me. It was the dress he had once said he loved. Dark red, fitted to my waist, the kind of dress he used to compliment in detail. "You look dangerous in that," he had told me the first time I wore it. "Like you could ruin my life with one look." Back then, it had made me laugh. Tonight, it sounded like foreshadowing. I tried to slow my breathing. Maybe he really was stuck at work. Maybe his phone had died. Maybe he was in the car, cursing at traffic lights and thinking about how sorry he would be. Maybe. The word maybe can be the kindest lie you tell yourself. I took a sip of water and forced it down. My reflection in the glass looked tired. The makeup under my eyes was starting to crease from the effort of holding myself together. I had arrived 10 minutes early. I always did. I liked watching him walk in, scanning the room for me, that small moment when his expression softened because he had found me. Tonight, the door opened and closed again and again, and each time it was someone else. Another 20 minutes dragged by. The waiter returned and placed a bread basket in the center of the table without asking, trying to be helpful. I thanked him, though I could barely get the word out. I opened our text thread and scrolled up, as if something in the past week would give me comfort. His messages had become shorter lately, less detail, more excuses. Busy, exhausted, talk later, rain check. I had told myself it was just stress. Work had been demanding, he said. New clients, tight deadlines, the usual. But the usual had become constant. The man who used to send me photos from his lunch break had stopped sharing anything at all. I lifted my phone again and called him. The line rang once, twice, 3 times, then cut straight to voicemail. That was new. He always kept his phone on. He used to joke that being reachable was part of the job. Tonight, he was unreachable. "Happy anniversary," I whispered to myself, because someone had to say it. The 4th time the waiter came back, he did not ask if I wanted to order. He asked if I was okay. It was such a simple question, but it hit me harder than anything else. Was I okay? I inhaled, felt my chest tighten, and realized I did not even know what that meant anymore. "I think," I started, then stopped. My throat burned. Can I just get the check for the drinks? He nodded quickly, understanding, and walked away without another word. I stared at the gift bag again. For a moment, I imagined him rushing in, breathless, apologizing, explaining. I imagined believing him. That little fantasy lasted all of 5 seconds before it collapsed under its own weight. The truth was not a sudden lightning strike. It was a slow drip that had been wearing away at me for months. Tonight was just the moment I finally felt what had already been hollowed out. My phone lit up again, but it was only a notification from some app I did not care about. No call, no message, no him. When I stepped outside, the air was cooler than I expected. The streetlights cast long, thin shadows on the pavement, and the sounds of the city wrapped around me. Cars passed, people laughed, a bus rumbled by. Life went on, without any idea that my world had quietly cracked open. I stood on the sidewalk in front of the restaurant and hesitated. Part of me wanted to call him again, to demand an explanation, to force him to choose a lie. Another part of me was afraid that hearing his voice would make this worse. Because if he answered with the wrong tone, the wrong excuse, the wrong silence, there would be no going back. I opened the ride app and ordered a car home. As I waited, I checked his social media out of reflex. Nothing new, no posts, no stories. Not that he posted often, but I was desperate for something, anything, that would make this feel less deliberate. The car arrived. I slid into the back seat and murmured my address. As the driver pulled away, I watched the restaurant shrink in the rearview mirror. That place had once been special. It was where he had taken me on our first anniversary, where he had toasted to our future, where he had told me he could not imagine his life without me. People who say things like that rarely imagine the day they will prove themselves wrong. On the way home, the city blurred past my window. Streetlights turned into streaks of pale gold against the glass. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, replaying the last few weeks in my mind, searching for clues I had ignored. He had been more careful with his phone, turning it face down, putting it in his pocket whenever I walked into the room. He used to leave it on the counter or toss it on the couch without thinking. Lately, it might as well have been glued to his hand. He had started working late more often. At first, I believed him without question. That was the kind of wife I was. I trusted first and doubted later. But recently, something had felt off. The way he avoided eye contact when I asked how his day went. The way he would rush to shower as soon as he got home, like he needed to wash his day off before I could smell it on him. And then there were the arguments. Not big ones, small, sharp ones, about nothing, about dishes and laundry and who forgot to buy milk. Fights that did not make sense, that escalated quickly and died just as fast, leaving behind an uneasy quiet. It was as if he needed me to be the problem so he did not have to look at what he was doing. The car turned onto our street. My stomach twisted. Home used to be a comforting word. Tonight, it felt like walking into the second half of a story I had not realized I was in. The driver stopped in front of our building. I thanked him, grabbed the small gift bag, and stepped out. The windows of our apartment were dark. His car was not in its usual spot. My chest tightened again. Maybe he was still at work. Maybe he was on his way. Maybe. The word felt rotten now. I climbed the stairs slowly, every step echoing louder than it should have. At our door, I hesitated with the key in my hand, as if opening it would make everything that much more real. Inside, the apartment greeted me with silence. No music, no television, no evidence of life. Just stillness. I set the gift bag on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long moment. The watch inside suddenly felt useless, like a joke I had not realized I was telling. My phone remained stubbornly silent. I walked down the hallway and sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the empty side where he should have been. My mind started to whisper questions I did not want to hear. If he was not here, and he was not on his way to me, then where was he? And who was he spending our anniversary with? I did not sleep that night. I lay on my side of the bed, staring into the darkness, tracing the familiar outline of the ceiling with my eyes. The red numbers of the alarm clock marked every passing minute, each one a reminder that he still was not home. At some point, halfway between midnight and morning, my mind slipped from the past into the past. It is strange how memory will reach for the moments that hurt the least when you are living through something that hurts the most. I thought about the first time I saw him. It was in a coffee shop on a rainy afternoon. I had ducked in to escape the sudden downpour, shaking water from my umbrella, my hair sticking to my forehead. The place was crowded, every table taken, people huddled over laptops and steaming cups. I remember feeling frustrated, cold, and tired in that small, ordinary way that comes from a long day. He noticed me before I noticed him. He stood up, this stranger with warm eyes and a half smile, and gestured to his table. "You look like you need this more than I do," he said. I almost refused out of habit. I was used to handling things myself. But something about the way he said it, gentle and sincere, made me nod and accept. He moved his things aside, and we shared that small, worn table by the window. We talked like people who had known each other longer than a single rainy afternoon. He made me laugh. Not the polite laugh I gave to coworkers or acquaintances, but the kind that came from somewhere deeper. When I left, he slipped his number onto the sleeve of my cup with a simple message: "In case you ever need a table again." At the time, it felt like fate. Now, lying in the dark, I wondered if fate had a twisted sense of humor. Our first anniversary had been a small miracle to me. We went back to that same coffee shop. The weather was clear this time, but he insisted on sitting by the window anyway. He brought flowers. He held my hand across the table and told me he had never felt so sure about anything in his life. Back then, every word from him felt like a promise written in stone. We got married 2 years later. It was not a grand wedding, but it was ours. I remember the vows most clearly. The way his voice sounded when he swore he would always choose me. The way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room that mattered. For a while, he lived up to those words. He would text me in the middle of the day just to say he missed me. He would show up with my favorite takeout after a long shift. He would fall asleep with his hand resting on my waist, like he needed to feel that I was there even in his dreams. Our anniversaries became landmarks, little checkpoints that reminded us of where we started and how far we had come. Dinner reservations, thoughtful gifts, inside jokes, traditions that felt sacred. On our third anniversary, he surprised me with a weekend trip. I remember the way he watched my reaction as I opened the envelope with the hotel confirmation. He looked proud of himself, eager, a little boy who had done something good and wanted praise. We spent that weekend wrapped in soft sheets and quiet mornings, walking through unfamiliar streets, talking about the future. "Do you ever think about how lucky we are?" he had asked me late one night, his head resting on my lap as we watched some old movie. "I do," I had said, brushing his hair away from his forehead. "More than you know." I meant it. Every bone in my body believed we were building something that would outlast every storm. I had no idea that there would come a day when the storm would be him. The shift did not happen all at once. It rarely does. If someone walked into your life and announced they were going to break your heart, at least you would know the shape of the danger. Ours began quietly. He started staying later at work. At first, I was proud of him. He had always been ambitious. He wanted to move up, to be seen, to be valued. I cooked dinner and kept it warm in the oven. Sometimes he would text to say he was running late. Sometimes he would just walk in, shoulders tight, apologizing as he loosened his tie and kissed my forehead. "It is just the season," he would say. "Things will calm down soon." I believed him. I remember the first time I truly noticed something was wrong. It was a small thing, so small that it almost slipped past me, like a fish skirting the edge of a net. We were sitting on the couch, each of us on our phones. I made some stupid joke about a meme I had seen and reached over to show him. As I leaned in, his screen lit up with a message and he tilted it away from me so fast it was almost instinct. I froze, my hand still halfway between us. He laughed, forcing it, his voice just a little too bright. "Work stuff," he said quickly, "nothing interesting." I smiled and pretended to accept it, but something inside me had shifted. That had never been his reaction before. He used to show me everything: funny emails, annoying clients, texts from friends. His life had been an open book, and suddenly, a page had been ripped out. After that, I started noticing more things. The way he kept his phone on silent, the way he would step out of the room to take certain calls, the way he started locking his screen with a new passcode and teasingly refused to tell me what it was. "You do not need it," he had said with a grin. "What, you planning to spy on me?" He said it like a joke, light and harmless, but the punchline stuck in my throat. Then came the smell, a hint of a perfume that was not mine. At first, I told myself it was someone from the office. Maybe he had brushed against them in the hallway. Maybe it was just the air in some elevator. You can talk yourself into a lot of maybes when you are afraid of the word no. No, he is not cheating. No, he would not do that. No, not him. I remember one week in particular. He had a conference in another city. He packed quickly, almost too quickly, shoving shirts into a bag without his usual overthinking. He kissed me goodbye in the doorway, his lips barely touching mine, already somewhere else. For 3 days, his messages were sporadic, short answers, no calls. When I tried to call him, he would reply later with an apology about being in a session, in a meeting, exhausted in his room. When he came back, he was distant, quiet, overly gentle, like I was made of glass. "Everything okay?" I had asked. "Just tired," he had said. It was a lot. I had hugged him. I had let it go. That was months before the anniversary. I think about that now, and I feel a different kind of exhaustion. Not from the past, but from the way I squeezed myself into the shape of understanding over and over, just to avoid seeing what was standing right in front of me. The red numbers on the alarm clock crept toward 3 in the morning. It was not supposed to be this quiet. Where are you? The first time I had asked myself that question about him, it had been innocent. He had forgotten to text when he arrived somewhere. I had worried. Now, the question tasted bitter. His side of the closet door stood slightly open. I could see the outline of his suits hanging neatly, the shoes he kept in precise order below them. To anyone else, it would look like a man who took care of his things. To me, it looked like a man who had already decided exactly who he wanted to be and simply moved in that direction without telling me he had changed course. I stood up and walked toward the closet, more to have something to do than because I expected to find anything there. I touched his jackets, each one familiar. There is something haunting about the clothes of a person who is not where they are supposed to be. They hold the shape of a body that is absent. My fingers brushed against the inside pocket of one of his blazers and felt something stiff. I slid it out without thinking. It was an old receipt from a restaurant across town. The date caught my eye, 2 months earlier. The time was late, later than he usually stayed out for work dinners. I glanced at the line items: 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, a dessert shared. He had told me he had been working late at the office that night. My first thought was not anger. It was confusion, a strange, hollow confusion that made my chest feel empty, as if someone had scooped something out and forgotten to put it back. I told myself it could have been a work dinner, a client, a colleague, someone who needed entertaining, but the doubt had already been planted, and it began to grow quickly in the silence of that sleepless night. I put the receipt back where I found it, not because I wanted to pretend it did not exist, but because I suddenly understood something. Whatever this was, it was not a random mistake. It was a pattern. It had started long before our anniversary. I returned to the bed and sat on the edge, staring at the darkened screen of my phone. I could feel something shifting inside me, something quiet but firm, like steel being forged. If he was going to lie to me, fine, but I was done lying to myself. The next time he told me he was working late, I would not just listen. I would start paying attention. He came home the next evening acting as if the night before had not happened, as if I had not spent hours alone in a restaurant meant for the two of us, as if I had not sat awake until dawn wondering who he was with while I waited for a man who no longer existed. The door opened at 7:30. He stepped inside with his usual rushed energy, keys jingling, jacket half shrugged off, voice warm in that practiced way. Long day, traffic was awful, sorry I'm late. Late. The word hit me like a slap. I watched him set his bag on the counter, watched him kiss me lightly on the cheek without looking directly into my eyes. He smelled faintly of cologne I had never known him to wear. I answered with a small sound that could have been a greeting or an accusation. He didn't seem interested enough to decide which. "How was your day?" he asked while scrolling on his phone. "Quiet," I said. He nodded without hearing me. Something about the casualness of it made my skin crawl. Not guilt, not remorse, not an attempt at repair, just routine. As if he assumed I would always be here, unchanged, waiting, forgiving. I studied him in a way I never had before. I paid attention to the details he thought I never noticed. He kept checking his phone. He would open it, glance at the screen, then set it face down. He smiled at something I wasn't part of. He had a softness around his eyes I hadn't seen in months, but it wasn't for me. He heated leftovers, sat beside me on the couch, and talked about nothing. I nodded at all the right times. I pretended to listen. But underneath every breath, a question echoed louder and louder. Who is she? He didn't offer anything about the night before. No apology, no explanation, not even a lie elegant enough to mask the truth. He had erased our anniversary as if it were nothing more than a date on a receipt he forgot to claim. The silence between us grew sharp. Around 10:30, his phone buzzed. He picked it up too fast. His posture changed. A subtle straightening of his shoulders, a drop in his voice, a flicker of something like longing quickly extinguished. "I need to check on something for work," he said. "I'll be in the office for a bit." He walked into his home office and closed the door. Work. The word was starting to sound like code for something else. I stayed on the couch for a few minutes, hoping he would slip, hoping he'd forget to silence his phone, hoping I'd hear a whisper of truth through the door. All I heard was the sound of him typing. Then nothing. Just stillness. I stood and walked to the bedroom. My chest felt tight, but not from heartbreak this time. It was focus. The kind that comes when you finally stop avoiding the truth. If he wanted to play secretive, then fine. I would stop waiting for him to hand me answers. I would find them. When I opened the drawer of his nightstand, I wasn't sure what I expected. A note, a hidden letter, something obvious. Instead, it was just the usual. Loose change, a few receipts, old movie ticket stubs, a pen that didn't work. Then I saw his old phone, the one he had switched out a few months earlier when his battery had been acting up. I had forgotten he kept it. My pulse quickened. I picked it up, pressed the power button, and watched the screen glow to life. It still held a charge, it still worked, and he had never bothered to wipe it. The lock screen slid open with the old passcode I still remembered. A door to his past, a past I suddenly needed to see. I wasn't looking for pain, I was looking for answers, but sometimes they are the same thing. I opened his messages first, scrolling backward through months of conversations. Most of it was harmless. Work chatter, friends, boring exchanges. Nothing stood out until a thread near the middle of his contacts caught my eye. Just a first name, a woman's name, someone he had mentioned only once in the past year, in the most casual tone. "Oh, she's new at work. Don't really know her." The tone he used when discussing someone irrelevant. But this message thread was not irrelevant. My throat tightened as I opened it. The first message was from her. "Did you get home safe last night?" Last night. I scrolled downward. There were more messages. Too many. And none of them belonged between coworkers. "I can still hear your laugh. You're trouble, you know that. When can I see you again?" My vision blurred. The room tilted slightly. My fingers trembled as I kept scrolling, even though every word was a cut. Then I saw a message from him, thinking about tonight. The timestamps were during hours he claimed he was in a meeting. A sickening clarity started to form, piece by piece, like a puzzle I no longer needed to deny. I scrolled further, and there it was, a restaurant name, the same restaurant as the receipt I found in his blazer, a reservation confirmation he had forwarded to her, 7:30 p.m., 2 months ago, exactly the night he told me he worked late on a project deadline. I stared at the screen as the truth washed over me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was choreography, planning, intention. He had taken her to dinner while I reheated pasta and believed in him. I kept scrolling. I shouldn't have, but I did. There were photos. Not explicit, not indecent, just intimate enough to crush whatever pieces of denial were still hanging on. A picture of 2 wine glasses, a dimly lit table, a blurred glimpse of her hand reaching toward his. Something inside me broke in a clean, quiet way. Not dramatic, not loud, just a soft internal snap, like a thread giving out after too much weight. My husband, my partner, my once best friend, the man who promised to always choose me, had been slowly shifting himself out of my life while convincing me I was imagining it. Now, the night before our anniversary dinner made sense. He wasn't working late. He had been with her. He lied to me with the confidence of someone who believed I would never question him. I closed the messages and set the phone on the bed beside me. My heart was pounding, but not with panic, with direction. The truth was no longer hiding. It was no longer subtle. It was no longer a whisper of suspicion. It was a confession, carved into the glow of an old screen. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and looked at the bedroom door, half expecting him to walk in. But he remained in his office, behind that closed door he guarded so carefully. I stared at the phone once more, and then a thought emerged, a dangerous one, a necessary one. If this was what the past months looked like, what would tonight reveal? The moment he left again, I would follow. Not to beg, not to fight, not to save anything, just to finally see the truth with my own eyes. He left the house the same way he had been leaving it for weeks, with ease, with routine, with confidence that I would stay exactly where he had placed me, inside the version of the story he had curated for me, like a framed picture hung neatly on a wall he no longer looked at. It happened the next night, around 8:30. He stood in the doorway of his home office, sleeves rolled up, expression molded into a tired smile. "I've got to head back to the office for a bit," he said. "Just a few hours. Don't wait up." Don't wait up. The words brushed past me like a cold hand across the spine. Familiar now, practiced. A sentence that once meant trust, but now meant the opposite. "I won't," I answered. He seemed relieved, too relieved. He picked up his keys, his phone, his jacket. He didn't say goodbye the way he used to. No kiss on the forehead, no soft "I love you." Just a quick glance toward me, as if checking whether the mask was still in place. Then he left. I stood in the middle of the living room, listening to the front door click shut, listening to his footsteps fade down the stairs, listening to the distant slam of his car door and the engine humming to life. I gave him a 5-minute head start, long enough for him to believe his illusion remained intact, long enough for my hands to stop shaking. Then I grabbed my things, the essentials, my phone, my wallet, a small hoodie. I didn't want to look like someone following her husband. I didn't want to look like someone hunting the truth. I wanted to look invisible. I slipped out of the apartment and down the stairwell, careful not to let the old boards creak under my feet. Outside, the evening air was cold against my face. The street lights cast long ribbons of gold across the pavement. His car was already gone, but I knew where he would be. The restaurant from the receipt, the one he lied about months ago. If he had been bold enough to take her there once, he'd be bold enough to do it again. Affairs were predictable that way. They followed rhythms, patterns, comfort zones disguised as danger. I got into my own car and started it quietly, forcing my breath to steady. My hands were cold on the steering wheel, not from fear this time, but from clarity. For the first time in months, the fog of denial had lifted, and the world was sharper. I followed the route I remembered from the receipt. 15 minutes away, near a row of boutiques and bars, a place designed to feel intimate and dimly lit, perfect for people who wanted to be seen and not seen at the same time. As I drove, memories came at me in fragments. A laugh he didn't explain, a late voicemail that sounded rehearsed, a moment when he returned home smelling faintly of citrus instead of his usual scent, a night when he had called me babe in a tone he hadn't used in months, the tone of a man trying to cover something quickly. I gripped the wheel tighter. Traffic lights changed, cars moved around me like ghosts. The city seemed too alive, while something inside me was dying quietly, steadily. When I turned the corner onto the restaurant street, I felt my pulse quicken. The parking lot was half full. Warm yellow lights spilled from the windows, silhouettes moving behind the glass like a play unfolding on a stage. I parked across the street, far enough to be unnoticed, but close enough to see the entrance. The air smelled faintly of rain. My breath formed white clouds in the cold. I waited. At first, nothing happened. People walked in and out, couples holding hands, groups laughing, a woman in a red coat hurrying inside to escape the cold. Then, at 8:57, his car turned into the lot. My chest tightened so sharply I had to remind myself to breathe. He got out. He wasn't dressed like a man going back to the office. No loosened tie, no stress on his face. He wore a pressed shirt, a dark jacket he usually saved for nicer occasions, and that cologne again, the one that didn't belong to me. He checked his phone and smiled, not at the screen, at a message that wasn't from me. He walked toward the entrance. A few seconds later, she appeared, the woman from the photos, the name in his messages, the one he had dismissed as someone new at work. She walked up to him with a smile that belonged to someone who believed she had been chosen. She touched his arm lightly, like she had been doing it for a while, like it came naturally. He leaned toward her with a familiarity that hit me harder than any slap could have. Not hurried, not guilty, comfortable. They talked for a moment, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that spoke more truth than any confession. Then he placed his hand on her back and guided her inside. The world did not explode. The earth did not crack open. The sky did not fall. But something inside me did, cleanly, painfully, with a silence that scared me more than the betrayal itself, the way a bone snaps without breaking skin. I sat there, watching the two of them disappear into the warm glow of the restaurant, and felt my heartbeat slow into something calm, almost too calm. There it is, I thought, the truth. Not the pieces I found in his old phone, not the scent on his collar, not the missed calls, or the lies layered like thin coats of paint over a rotting surface. This, the sight of him choosing her when he had promised, vowed, to choose me. I felt the strange clarity of someone standing on the edge of a cliff, realizing the drop isn't what they fear anymore. It's the idea of climbing back down and pretending the fall never existed. I opened my car door. The cold night air flooded in, sharp and steady. I stepped out slowly and stood there, letting myself feel the gravity of the moment. Not panic, not rage, not even heartbreak. Something colder, something stronger, a shift. I wasn't here to cause a scene. I wasn't here to drag him out by his collar or scream accusations across a candlelit table. That wasn't me. It had never been me. But I wasn't leaving without the truth. Not the soft, indirect truth I pieced together, but the truth in his eyes. I crossed the street. My footsteps were silent against the pavement. The city noise faded behind me until all I could hear was my own breath. When I reached the restaurant door, I paused. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, framed by warm light. I did not look broken. I looked awake, Inside, the hostess greeted me with a smile, unaware of the storm I carried inside my chest. "Table for one?" she asked. "No," I said quietly. I turned my head toward the dining area. I saw them, sitting close, sharing a menu, laughing in the way he used to laugh with me. He looked softer, freer, like a man who had shed his old life without telling the woman still living in it. I walked toward their table, not fast, not slow, just steady, a pace that matched the evenness of my heartbeat. He didn't see me at first. He was too focused on her. But she saw me. Her smile faltered. Her fingers froze on the menu. He followed her gaze. And then his eyes landed on me. For the first time in months, his mask cracked. There was shock, then fear, then something like guilt bleeding into his features. He whispered my name. And in that moment, standing in the warm light of the restaurant he had once taken me to, I realized something simple and devastating. He never expected me to open my eyes, but I had, and he could no longer look away from what he had done. For a moment, no one at the table breathed. Not him, not her, not me. The restaurant around us kept moving, forks clinking, waiters gliding between tables, conversations rising and falling, but the three of us were trapped in a bubble of stillness that made every second feel amplified. His eyes darted from me to her, then back to me, searching for an explanation that didn't exist. I didn't speak yet. I wanted him to feel the silence. I wanted him to sit inside it the way I had sat inside all the nights he claimed he was working late. He pushed his chair back slowly, as if any sudden movement might break the thin surface of composure he was trying to hold. What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tight, almost strangled. It wasn't the question of an innocent man. Innocent men ask with confusion. Guilty ones ask with panic. "I wanted to see you," I said, my voice steady. "You weren't home. Again." He swallowed hard. His throat bobbed like he was trying to force down a lie that had grown too big to swallow. The woman beside him, she looked up at me with wide eyes, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. She wasn't glamorous, she wasn't extraordinary. She was just a person who believed his stories, a person who thought she was the exception when she was just the newest pattern. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said softly. "Not yet." He stood now, still half leaning over the table, one hand gripping the back of his chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tight, almost strangled. It wasn't the question of an innocent man. Innocent men ask with confusion. Guilty ones ask with panic. "I wanted to see you," I said, my voice steady. "You weren't home. Again." He swallowed hard. His throat bobbed like he was trying to force down a lie that had grown too big to swallow. The woman beside him, she looked up at me with wide eyes, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. She wasn't glamorous, she wasn't extraordinary. She was just a person who believed his stories, a person who thought she was the exception when she was just the newest pattern. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said softly. "Not yet." He stood now, still half leaning over the table, one hand gripping the back of his chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "We can talk outside," he whispered. "Please, not here." There was a tremor in his voice. Good. Tremors meant truth was close. I stepped back a small distance, giving him space to move. The woman shifted uncomfortably, her gaze bouncing between us like she was searching for a version of the situation that made sense. He walked around the table, and I watched his face, the flickering guilt, the collapse of pretense, the faint desperation of someone whose lies had finally run out of room. When we reached the hallway outside the dining area, I turned to him. The dim lighting cast shadows across his features, softening the edges of the man I once loved. For a split second, I saw the boy from the coffee shop, the warm smile, the easy laugh, the hope. And then it was gone, replaced by the stranger he had allowed himself to become. "Are you going to explain?" I asked. He rubbed his hand over his face, looking exhausted, haunted. I didn't want you to find out like this. Find out what? I asked quietly. That you're here on our anniversary? With her? He flinched at that, and the guilt hardened in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The line was so predictable, it almost made me laugh. The kind of line people use when they don't want the responsibility for their choices. He had meant every step. Maybe not in the beginning, but somewhere along the way, intent had replaced accident. How long? I asked. He hesitated. How long? I repeated, sharper this time. He closed his eyes. Months. The number hit me like a quiet punch. Months. All that time I had been building excuses for him in my head, he had been building a second life somewhere else. So, I let the sentence trail off, letting him finish it. He stared at the floor. I wasn't supposed to be here with her tonight. I didn't know how to end things. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me, I echoed, the words tasting burnt. But you did it anyway. He looked up then, and I saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't love me anymore, at least not in the way that mattered. He loved the comfort I provided, the familiarity, the stability, but the connection we had built, the foundation we once stood on, had eroded while I wasn't looking, or maybe while he looked elsewhere. I still care about you, he said softly. Care? The word was hollow, a bandage on a bullet wound. That isn't the same thing, I replied. He opened his mouth to say something, but I stepped past him and walked back toward their table, not to confront her, not to blame her. She didn't owe me anything. She owed herself more than she realized, but I wasn't here to teach her lessons. I simply picked up my purse from the empty table a few feet away, a table I had passed earlier without even noticing, and turned back toward the exit. He followed me, his voice cracking. Please, let me explain, he said. Let me talk to you. Let me fix this. Fix? The word almost made me stop. Not because I believed he could fix it, but because it was such a pure lie, spoken with the desperation of someone who only realized the value of what he had the moment he lost it. I turned to face him. You broke something you don't know how to repair, I said, and you didn't even notice it happening. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I made a mistake. Mistakes don't last months, I replied. Mistakes don't rent tables for two. Mistakes don't send messages late at night. Mistakes don't wear cologne someone else picked out. He froze. That detail hit him harder than anything else I had said. He knew exactly which cologne I meant. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. You already did. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we could have had. It filled the space between us, the echo of every lie, every absence, every empty chair across from me at every table I had waited at alone. Finally, he spoke again, his voice cracked and thin. Can we go home and talk about this? No, I said, and the refusal felt like placing the final piece of a long, painful puzzle. I'm going home. You're staying here, with her, the way you've been doing for months. The truth landed on him like weight added to a sinking ship. His shoulders slumped, his breath trembled. The man who once loved me now stood like a man drowning, reaching for something already out of reach. I wasn't cold, I wasn't cruel, I wasn't angry. I was done. I stepped around him and walked toward the exit. Every step felt strangely light, like shedding the weight of a story I had been carrying alone. At the door, I paused and looked back. Not at him, but at myself reflected in the glass. I didn't look like someone who had been broken. I looked like someone waking up. He stood a few steps behind me, watching with the expression of a man who just realized the consequences of his own choices. His mouth opened as if to call my name, but no sound came out. He was losing something he never thought would slip away. Then I opened the door, stepped out into the cold night, and let it close behind me. And for the first time in months, I felt breath fill my lungs without pain. The cold night wrapped around me like a new kind of silence. Not the suffocating silence of waiting at a restaurant table, not the hollow silence of lying awake next to an empty space in my own bed. This silence was clean, sharp, honest. I walked toward my car slowly, letting each step settle inside me. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that appears only when the world has stopped feeling familiar. I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and rested my hands on the wheel without starting the engine. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel the instinct to rush home and wait for him. That version of me, the one who sat with hope burning holes in her chest, was gone. I could feel her absence like a phantom limb. Instead, I sat there and breathed. My phone buzzed against my bag. Even before I checked it, I knew it was him. The buzzing continued, first a call, then a message, then another message. The screen lit up again and again with his name. Each vibration felt like the echo of a life I was stepping out of. I didn't answer, not because I wanted to punish him, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because nothing he could say now would ever rewrite what I had seen with my own eyes. Words could not erase actions. Promises could not bury truth. Finally, I turned the key in the ignition, and the soft hum of the engine filled the quiet. I pulled out of the parking spot and began driving toward home, the lights of the restaurant shrinking in my mirror until they became nothing at all. The roads were empty. I let my thoughts unravel with the passing streetlights. I thought about the girl I had been, the woman who remembered every detail he liked, who planned surprises, who believed anniversaries mattered because they were markers of love. I felt a pang of grief for her, the way one grieves a version of themselves they can never go back to. But beneath the grief was something else, relief. Not relief that he had cheated, nothing about that would ever be relieving, but relief that the truth was finally visible, like a wound exposed to air that could finally begin to heal. When I reached our apartment, I parked and sat for a moment in the darkness. His car still wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. He was still at the restaurant, still with her, still trying to call me, still realizing too late what he had thrown away. I climbed the stairs, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The apartment felt different now. Not haunted, not heavy, just mine. I walked straight to the bedroom and turned on the lamp beside the bed. The soft light spilled across the room, illuminating the evidence of the life we had built together. Photos on the dresser, folded clothes, the scent of him still lingering in the pillows. I sat down on the edge of the bed. His calls finally stopped. Silence again. I closed my eyes and let memories surface naturally. Not the curated ones, the real ones. The morning he left early, claiming he had a meeting. The night he snapped at me for asking a simple question. The smile he gave his phone that he hadn't given me in months. The tired look he wore whenever I asked if we were okay. It wasn't just the cheating that ended us. It was the slow, unspoken departure, the quiet retreat of someone who stopped choosing me long before he touched her hand. I stood and walked to the dresser, opening the drawer where I kept some old keepsakes, movie stubs, letters, small notes he used to leave me on mornings when he woke up before I did. The letters used to feel like treasures. Tonight, they felt like artifacts from a story that had turned into fiction. I placed them in a small box, not to burn them, not to hide them, just to put them somewhere that didn't hurt. Then I reached for the gift bag, the watch I had bought him for our anniversary. I pulled the box out, opened it, and stared at the sleek metal face reflecting the lamplight. I used to think it was perfect for him. Now it looked like a relic belonging to someone I had imagined. I set it aside. When the door finally opened downstairs, nearly an hour later, I didn't rush to meet him. I didn't brace myself. I didn't prepare for another lie. I simply waited. His footsteps were hesitant on the stairs, slower than usual, heavy, like each step carried the weight of something he couldn't put down. Then he appeared in the doorway. His face was flushed from the cold and from whatever conversation he must have had with her after I left. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from panic. He looked at me like someone looking at the aftermath of a fire they caused with a careless spark. "I came home," he said quietly. "I see that," I replied. He took a step toward me. "Can we talk?" I nodded once, not because I owed him anything, but because I deserved closure spoken aloud, not whispered, not guessed, not pieced together from lies. He sat across from me, unable to meet my eyes. "I never meant for this to happen," he started. "You didn't stop it," I said. He swallowed hard. "I know." "Why her?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his tell when he was unraveling. "I don't know. It was easy. She made me feel seen. And He stopped there. The truth was this. He betrayed me because he could, because comfort can make people greedy, because some hearts don't know how to stay loyal once they are offered a new place to hide. "Do you love her?" I asked. He hesitated. The hesitation was my answer. I exhaled slowly. "You broke something in me," I said, "but you didn't destroy me." He finally looked up, and he saw it, the shift, the calm, the absence of desperation. He saw a woman no longer begging for love, no longer waiting for apologies that always arrived too late. "Are we done?" he whispered. "We are," I said. 2 words, simple, final. He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, I saw acceptance. Pain, yes. Regret, yes. But acceptance all the same. He knew I wasn't saying it out of anger. I was saying it because it was true. I stood, walked to the bedroom door, and paused. "People don't lose everything in one moment," I said softly. "They lose it piece by piece, every time they choose someone else in small ways. Tonight was just the moment I finally saw all the pieces." I left the room, letting him sit there with the truth. The same truth I had carried alone for months. In the quiet of the hallway, I felt something ease in my chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time. My life was no longer tied to his choices. I walked into the living room, turned off the lights, and stood looking out the window at the sleeping city. The truth echo settled inside me, clear and calm. He spent our anniversary with her, but I will spend the rest of my life without him. And for the first time, that thought didn't hurt. It felt like freedom.